Hello, my dear students. We are going to explore the features for writing in academic register. First of all, let's take a look at the differences between a formal and informal style for writing. We have two examples here. Researchers looked at the way a strain builds up around a fault, and researchers observed the way a strain accumulates around a fault. In these two examples, which mean the same, we have two different options for two different verbs. The first example shows us phrasal verbs look at and build up to express like the same idea, but in the second example we have the same sentence with a more academic verb, the academic style. They are like transparent English, Latin like English, observe, accumulate, but in fact that means the same. So we are going to have some practice, and here we have to select the verbs that best replace the verbs that are in italics in the sentences below. So as you see, we have 10 sentences, and we have some verbs italicized. You have to consider in the above box the set of verbs that are the options we have to replace the informal ones which are below. And well, for this you need to pause the video for a while, read carefully, identify the verb, and consider the appropriate one which is given in the options for more academic verbs above. Okay, after the pause and after the practice, I'm pretty sure this was not a very difficult task. Let's go over the next tip to write more academically. Here we have the suggestion of using long noun phrases, which tend to carry a lot of meaning in rather a compact form. But it's little by little having more elements to a sentence, adding them so as to have more consolidated noun phrases. So here we have the example with language, the language of scientific communication, the international language of scientific communication, English as the international language of scientific communication, and the emergence of English as the international language of scientific communication. Little by little, through practice, the intention is that you are having such transition from simple sentences into more complex ones. And in here, noun phrases from simple nouns to progressively being adding more extra information or adjectives or things that will give substance to a noun. So now you have more or longer noun phrases. Thus, it is possible to write the emergence of English as the international language of scientific communication has been widely documented, as opposed to English has emerged as the international language of scientific communication. This phenomenon has been widely documented. So the idea is to shorten the idea within a single noun phrase, a more consolidated sentence. Another tip has to do with suitable expressions for academic papers. So here we have 5 sentences, and we have two options italicized. So you need to consider the alternatives that are more suitable to write more academically. Of course, you need to pause the video and read slowly and consider them. This is not a difficult task. Fine. In terms of style and more features, we have more tips. The first one, avoid writing I. So instead of saying In this paper, I argue that small incentives can lead to greater participation in service. It can be replaced by this paper argues that small incentives can lead to greater participation in service. So you're not taking such responsibility, though the researcher or the writer is yourself. I mean, you can refer to the paper, the type of writing. This is a attempts to. The purpose of this research paper is the teacher researcher attempts to show, display, compare, describe, etc., etc. Some writers prefer taking such responsibility, or if they are a group of researchers or writers, they say we. But it is suggested that you avoid using the I or we as the main attribution of the responsibles of writing the paper. The other tip is avoid using contractions. This is a very famous tip. We have this example. Expert features won't improve until the economy is stronger. So instead of using won't, you turn to use will not. More tips. Instead of using not any, you use no, not much, little, not many, few. Here, for countable nouns, countable and uncountable, you have to pay attention to the subject, if it is plural, singular, countable, uncountable, so to make decisions there. Please read the examples. We have more tips. Avoid using vague expressions such as things like those, stuff like that, etc. Those are vague expressions. So we have to be specific to what we are referring to. And here we have the example. Micropumps can be used in drug delivery, lab on a chip analysis, etc. So here it is noticeable that the writer does not contain that much information as expected. But whenever we are publishing or sharing contents, written production with an audience, the responsibility is to go beyond the information we initially have. So we need to have some research on the arena so as to be more precise. So we have then micropumps can be used in drug delivery, lab on a chip, analysis, ink dispensing, and other specialized applications that require self-contained, low-power, miniature pumps. Okay, so here, okay, there was previous research. There are things to be listed, and it gives more confidence for consulting or for attending or like for the reader to be focused on the content. Another tip: avoid using you and indirect questions. You can see the results in table 1. Instead, you can use here passive register. The results can be seen in. Some appreciations can be observed, can be discussed in figure 1. Okay. Another tip: avoid adding questions in academic papers. There is a question: why has antibiotic resistance increased? Instead, that can be reformulated. Many studies have investigated why antibiotic resistance has increased. Or, it is important to understand why antibiotic resistance has increased, or it remains unclear why antibiotic resistance has increased. Remember the use of relative clauses here. Not necessarily why goes as part of a question. Can be restructured within a sentence. Avoid using slangs, informal expressions. So, let's appreciate these sentences. I showed that his arguments did not hold water. Instead, it is suggested to write, it has been proved that the arguments so far are without foundation, in a more academic way. Proofreading, which is really important, is a really important part. When you finish writing a paragraph, well, a sentence, a paragraph, or a composition. So you need to check your work to identify small errors that may make it more difficult for the reader to understand. Sometimes self-correction magically happens. You will notice the mistake, you will give the correction, and that's a sample of learning. I mean, that is natural to happen, and it is much better that you become yourself editor. If a sentence has only one error, for example, she has no enough interpersonal skills to handle different relationships, it is not difficult to understand. But if there are multiple errors, even though they are all quite minor, the accumulative effect is very confusing. Demolition of several UK banks like Northern Rock and May others, so your lack cohesion, coherence. We have faulty use in spelling, grammar, and of course it's going to uh, affect the reader's understanding negatively. Proofreading is important, so take the time to revise, to correct, to adjust what you have just written. So here we have some practice. We have examples of the most common types of errors in student writing. And well, the idea is that the type of error is given, you have to identify in the sentence which corresponds to the error that is suggested. For example, the first one is a factual error. And we have the example, corruption is a problem in many countries such as Africa. Factual, facts. Which is the error? Next, we have word ending. She was young and innocent. Word ending. Young and innocent. Next, punctuation. However, some strains of malaria are resistant, so it is necessary sometimes to read aloud to be able to identify the pauses. Something is missing there. Tense. Since 2005, there were 3 major earthquakes in the region. Tense. Vocabulary. Vital to the successfulness of a company operating in China. Vocabulary. Is that right? Which is wrong. Spelling. Peer views experience can sometimes give researchers, okay, well, reading aloud will help a lot. Another, singular versus plural. One of the largest company in Asia. Style. Finally, the essay will conclude with a conclusion. Okay. Missing word. An idea established by David Ricardo in 19th century. Missing word, which is missing. Word order. A rule of marketing which states that consumers when go out shopping, okay, something is not um, very well there, you know. So pause the video, take the time to identify. The clue is the same noun of or the type of error, so please do identify it and correct it. Fine. Okay, here you have the answers. The same? Good job. Now, as suggested or as required in class, you need to complete this self-reflective chart. I used to think that, now I know that. I'm pretty sure there is a meaningful transition in your understanding and beliefs regarding writing academically. Thank you very much for your attention.